All right, everyone, thanks for joining me today. So this is a great video that we're going to be discussing. I am excited to bring this video today because we're going to be liberating some minds today. We're going to be setting some minds free, our people. I'm going to attempt to do that in this video. And I'm going to use one of our proudest leaders in Africa, Ibrahim Traoré's speech to try to attempt to do that. I have been studying the various speeches by this very inspiring African leader, whom we are all so proud of. You see, I think it's important that we celebrate leaders like this of ours, especially when we have a lot of our leaders who have been demonized and many who truly embarrass us. When we have one like this, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, we celebrate him. And I'll continue to bring out videos to you all to celebrate a man like this. I want to play a video and a speech that he made during the Russia-Africa Summit. I took the time to listen to this speech, and I want you to hear what he said in his speech during that summit. How he says that Russia is a family to Africa. Now that will come across to a lot of you and a lot of us as something that you're like, I don't know. That's crazy talk. Russia. Really? And the reason why many, if not some of you, might be thinking that or have that type of feelings towards that statement is because of the propaganda that we've been sold. By who? By none other than those who oppress us. So I've got a lot I want to talk about. Like I said, we're going to be setting some minds free today. Because when you think of Russia, when you think of China, these people have been sold to us as people that we need to have as enemies. And who sold that to us? The ones who colonized us, the ones who oppress us today. And so I think it's interesting that one of our most favorite leaders in Africa, one of our beloved leaders in Africa, says in his speech that Russia is a family to Africa. And I've got a lot I want to cover in this video because it is a video that's truly going to set somebody and a few people free today from colonialism, from neo-colonial thinking, from the type of propaganda that we've been sold by those who colonized us and subjugated us and have continuously done it. And we bought their version of stories, even while they have been and continue to be our oppressors. So take a look at this. I'm going to let this play in its entirety, and we'll have a great conversation today. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to Blaze Lecoy for your 5.99 euros on my last video. I truly appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much for it. I am humbled by it. And so shout out to you for such a generous donation. And please, guys, keep the super chat coming. And as you continue to honor me with your money, I will truly give you guys a shout out for you. So thanks again for it. Okay, so let's take a look at this video and we'll have a great conversation today.
Comrade President Vladimir Putin, African heads of state, Comrade head of delegation, good morning. It is an honor for me this morning to take the floor here and to pass on to you the fraternal greetings of the people of the land of men of integrity. It is from the Almighty that we have been able to gather here this morning in good health to talk about the future and the well-being of our people. I am going to apologize to the elders whom I may offend in my future remarks. Because of Africanity, because of the rights of one of them, I have to apologize. Comrade, I have a few questions from my generation. Not a single question that is being asked. We don't have an answer, and it turns out that here we can wash our linseed because we feel like a family. It feels like a family in the sense that Russia is also a family for Africa. It is a family because we have the same history. Russia made enormous sacrifices to liberate the world from Nazism during the Second World War. The people of Africa, our grandfathers, were also forcibly deported to help Europe get rid of Nazism. We share the same history in the sense that we are the forgotten peoples of the world, whether in the history books, in documentaries, or in film, insofar as we sweep away the preponderant role played by Russia and Africa in this fight against Nazism. We are here together because we are here to talk about the future of our peoples and what is to come. Of the future of tomorrow, of the free world to which we aspire, of a world without interference in our internal affairs. We have the same prospects, and I hope that this summit will be an opportunity to forge very good relations and to create a better future for our peoples. The questions that my generations are asking themselves about the next generation, if I can sum it up, is that they do not understand how Africa, with so much wealth on our soil, with its generous nature, water and abundant sunshine, Africa is today the poorest continent. Africa is a starving continent, and how is it that our heads of state are traveling through the world of a man? These are questions that we are asking ourselves and that we have not yet had answers. We have the opportunity to forge new relationships, and I hope that these relations can be the best, to give a better future to our peoples. My generation also instructs me to say that because of poverty, they are forced to cross the ocean in order to try to reach Europe. They die in the ocean. But that soon they will not have crossed it, because they will come in front of our palaces to look for their daily sustenance. As far as Burkina Faso is concerned, for more than 8 years, we have been confronted with the most barbaric and violent form of neo-colonialism and imperialism. Slavery still has so much to impose on us. Our front runners have taught us one thing: slavery that is not capable of accepting its own revolt does not deserve to be relied upon by its fate. We don't worry about our fate. We are not asking for someone to rely on our fate. The people of Burkina Faso have decided to fight against hypothyrism capable of reviving its development. In this struggle, valiant peoples, wines, and a population have pledged to take up arms in the face of terrorists. The ones we actually called the VDPs, volunteers. We are surprised to see the imperialists calling these VDPs militias and of all kinds. It is one of those wines, because in Europe, when people take up arms to defend their patriots, they are called patriots. Our grandfathers were deported to save Europe. It was not with their consent, against their grey. Well, on the way back, we remember that in Dyer, when they tried to bandage their elemental sheet, they were massacred, so it doesn't matter. When we people decide to defend ourselves, we are called militias. But that's not the problem. What is the problem is to see African heads of state who bring nothing to these peoples who are fighting, but who sing the same thing as the imperialists. To our militia dealers, to our traders, therefore, to men who do not respect human rights, hence the human right. We are effusive against this and these shameful people. We, the African heads of state, must stop behaving like puppets who dance every time the imperialists pull the strings. Yesterday, President Vladimir Putin announced that the grain would be sent to Africa. And we are very happy, and we thank each other for that. But it is also a message to our African heads of state, because at the next forum, we must not come here without having ensured that our peoples will be able to achieve food self-sufficiency for those who do not know war. We need to learn from those who have already been able to achieve this in Africa, build good relations here and build better relations with the Russian Federation so that we can meet the needs of our people. I may not be slow, time is running out and very short. We are obliged to stop and love my take. But I would like to end by saying that we must therefore pay tribute to our peoples who are fighting. Glory to our peoples, dignity to our peoples, victory to our people.
Let's talk about this. That was a very powerful speech, and I want to dissect this because what he focused on in his speech were two things. One, that Russia is family to Africa. And then secondly, Africans leaders are puppets to the West, and they need to stop being puppets to the West. I want to focus on the first one. Now, why would Ibrahim Traoré say that Russia is a family to Africa? It is not the type of message that we often hear. A lot of us, when we think of Russia, we think of this place that is a taboo. We often put Russia in the same basket we'll put North Korea, right? The same basket we'll put China. We put these countries in the same basket. Now, what is common with these countries? These countries have never colonized Africa. Russians and the Russian country, China and the Chinese people never colonized us. The reason why we see Russians and Chinese and a couple of all these other countries as enemies is because our colonizers told us that they are enemies. The reason why a lot of you and a lot of us never go to Russia on vacation. I mean, if I asked you right now, when was the last time any of you went to Russia to go vacation in Russia? Most of you will probably say you never go to Russia. None of you go to Russia to the Kremlins to go see the architecture, and they have beautiful architectural buildings over there. The reason why many of us, black people, Africans, never go to these places is because our colonizers told us that they are the enemies. And so why are they the enemy? That's the question. Why are these countries Africa's enemy? Because, as I mentioned earlier on, Russians and Russia never colonized Africa. Chinese and China never colonized Africa. As a matter of fact, China is one of the oldest dynasties in the world. They've been around for thousands of years. They had ships, and they could certainly have gone to take Africa if they wanted to. But they never did. They never did. China was always a powerful dynasty. They had lots of people. They were skilled in military combats. But they never went and took Africa. Because that was not their value. That's not what they believe in. They don't believe in enslaving people. They never did. Russians also never did. Right? Russia conquered worlds, but never went and enslaved our people. The ones that came to enslave us were the British, the French, the Italians, Germany, white people from the West and Europe. And even while Russia is part of Europe, they never came. The question is, why? But somehow, black people all over the world are made to hate these countries because our colonizers and those that enslaved and bought and sold our people, stole our people, told us that they are enemies of ours. So when you find a guy like Ibrahim Traoré telling you and telling us that Russia is a family to Africa and that Russians and Africans have similar history, that sounds very foreign to many of us. Yes, we're going to liberate a lot of minds today. I am going to set your minds free. Because how is it possible that Africans listen to the voices of their colonizers? Africans listen to the voices of those that subjugate them and take the messaging of their colonizers, even till today, over people who never enslaved you. How is it possible? I'm asking. My brothers and sisters, please help me understand this. That we have taken and adopted the language, the culture, the religion, the values of those who have beaten, placed us in shackles, robbed our lands, continue to do it today, and have bought into their belief system about who we need to love and who we need to hate, that today we see countries that had nothing to do with our subjugation, nothing to do with our enslavement, nothing to do with our minerals from being looted. But somehow we hate them and we don't speak of them, nor do we go and partner with them for any business dealing. But we all take vacations to Paris, to the United States, to England, to Italy. These countries who colonized us, who colonized our countries, who are stealing from our places where we come from, these are the ones that we go to. Why? Because a lot of us have been misled. The propaganda that has been sold to a lot of us, the propaganda, the miseducation that have been sold to a lot of us. Most Africans and black people have been taught the European history. When you hear the story of slavery, it's usually told from the European perspective. When you hear the story of Africa, it's usually told from the European perspective. As a matter of fact, you don't even hear a lot of stories from Africa, story about Africa. Many times when you hear about the slave story, like I said, it comes from the European perspective. And so they give a one version of that story. And that story usually begins from, okay, Africans were brought into this country, and the slavery story only happened in the West and not in Africa. You don't hear of how African village husbands and wives were devastated, villages killed and looted and destroyed, children massacred, because the Europeans wanted free labor to fix their country. You don't hear that story. You only hear it from the fact that they came here and they were slaves in this country. And that story should be told. And I'm glad that we've told that story. But most of us don't know the stories and how our people in Africa were destroyed, were never recognized, village pillaged at the hands of white people during the slavery era, and it's still going on today. For example, the story that most of you don't know about Africa, we're going to tell African stories today. During World War II, Africans were recruited from different colonies to go and die and fight the white man's war during World War II. It is said that over 500,000 Africans by the British were recruited to go and fight against Hitler, against Germany in World War II. France recruited over 30,000 Africans from its colonies to go and die and fight their wars for them. And when all that was over, not a single African was honored for fighting the white person's war. Not one. It was sent back to the colonies like nothing. Husbands died. Children lost their fathers. Women were left widows. And not a single African was awarded any honor, Medal of Honor, by both France and England for recruiting our people to go fight their wars. But they honored their own people. When their people came back from fighting in World War II, you should have seen the streets in England. They were giving heroes welcome. They give them medals of honor. They give them medals of honor in their own country. They honor their own people for fighting in a war. But our own people, whom they recruited from the colonies, were never honored. They said send them back. Go back to the colonies and wait further instructions and oppressions and subjugations. Imagine that. Imagine that. Historians will tell you today that that act was what caused Africans to begin seeking their own freedom. That's experience that Africans had, which left a bitter taste in a lot of the ones that came back. The ones that were wounded badly, that came back with diseases, that came back with a lot of injuries that were not catered to. That inspired them to begin seeking their own liberation and independence from these white colonialists. For the first time, Africans who saw white folks as their own God, because that's how they were sold at, saw white folks dying next to them in the war, saw white folks crying when there were shots in the leg. So they said, oh, so these people are not really gods. They're like us. They feel pain like we feel pain. They die like we die. What God used that experience to do was to expose these liars who came to Africa to present themselves as the gods in the Bible. The angelic people in the Bible, which Africa saw as that, which is why Africans were subservient to white people during that time. And so these white people were exposed to these Africans during World War II who saw white folks die like they died, saw them in pain like they were in pain, saw them crying during the war. And that, for the first time, Africans were like, oh, so these people are really human beings like us. And so when they sent them back to the colonies and said, go back, it inspired Africans now seeking their own independence, which is how Africans were all getting their independence right about the same time. That is a story that most of you don't know. You don't know this story because they don't tell our story. I'm here to tell you the African story. I'm here to tell you the African story that's never been told before. You don't find this anywhere. That's what my whole channel is dedicated to right now, is to tell our story so our children can understand our story. We always fight their battles. We always fight their wars. They always can recruit us with propaganda, with lies, because they know we'll fall for them. Because they know that Africans, with all the lies that Africans have been told and sold for years, Africans will fall for anything they tell us. And so they recruit us to go fight their wars. They recruit us to go fight their battles. But when it's time to honor us, they shit on us and say, go away. And they still discriminate against us in the face of using us to fight their battles. And today they're still doing it. And we're letting them do it. I am here to set you free. I'm here to emancipate your mind. So that way you can begin impacting your children with the truth. And setting the next generations of your family line free so they're not enslaved like you were enslaved. And even worse, the hypocrisy of that war was that these countries, France and Britain, were fighting against Nazis and their beliefs of oppression against the world, while they were oppressing their colonies. Imagine the hypocrisy that you have the British government recruit our people to go and fight their war under the guise that they're liberating Germans and Germany from a dictator that was there, while these same ones, France and England, were colonizing and oppressing people in their colonies. Imagine the hypocrisy. Imagine the hypocrisy. And when our people died, fell, killed in large numbers, they sent the rest of them back to their colonies to go and continue the oppression that they were putting on them. Till today, Africans have never been recognized for their role in World War II. It's the same way they use our brothers and sisters in this country. See, while Africans were being used when they recruited Africans to go and die in World War II, same way they recruited our brothers and sisters, African Americans in this country, to go to World War II and also fight in Vietnam. But when they came back home, these same white folks who utilize us to fight their battle were discriminated against them. Housing discrimination, job discrimination is the same thing. But today, we black folks buy into their message of hating people who never colonized Africa. And we cling to the ones that have kept us subjugated. Why? Why are we still enslaved in our minds today? Brothers and sisters, why are we taking the ways of our oppressors? We've taken their language. Do you know that in Africa, you are not allowed to teach your local language in the schools in Africa? When I was growing up in school, if I'm lying, leave it in the comment section. If I'm lying about what I'm about to say and what I'm saying, leave it in the comment section. When I was going to school, we spoke English. English was the only language that was allowed to be taught in schools. English. You couldn't graduate or pass unless you passed English. They told you to go home and learn your local language. It was an abomination when I was growing up in school in Nigeria. Nigeria is not the only one. This happens in every African country. In every African country. English is the dominant language and it's not our first language. You find people in Africa today who will not graduate their people without them passing English, the language of the colonial and the colonialist, imperialist in the country. You find countries who are named by our colonialists, imperialists, who still have their names. You find African countries who think that being proper is to dress like the Europeans and those who subjugate us, much more than putting on their native and their own local clothing. You find in Africa the ways of Europe and the West dominant in African society, much more than the local beliefs. Africans are fighting themselves today to do away with their own local religion, local values, and adopting the same people who have subjugated us and continue to keep us down. So, imagine that for a second. Just imagine it for a second. I am here to set you free. I am here to set us free. Because I think it's incredibly embarrassing and truly a lost place for us that our books in our countries in Africa are written in English. They're not written in our local language. You will hardly find books in your local language. See, when I was growing up, English was what was spoken in our household. I can hardly speak my local language today, and I'm not proud of it, because my parents spoke English to us at home. My parents spoke English to us at home. Today you go to Africa, and you'll find black people that will fight amongst themselves that you're not pronouncing the right English word properly. Can you imagine that? You will go to Africa, you will find black people, even in this country, that are arguing the right pronunciation for the English language, a language that is not yours, a language that was beaten into you by your oppressors. Black folks will fight each other at the right pronunciation of an English language. They are hardly speaking their own language, their own local language to themselves. You'll find black people and Africans that will tell you we're becoming evolved and we're liberating ourselves by adopting Western ideology. That the ways of the African is the mundane and the old ways of doing things. And so the new way of doing things is adopting your oppressors' values The ones that have kept and continue to keep our lands deserted. And so we hate what he hates and we love what he loves. This video is not about hating white people. Let me make this clear. Let me help you understand this. This video is not about hating white people. This video is about you finding yourself as a black person. You finding yourself as a black person. Recognizing your identity on this planet. And so when a man like Ibrahim Traoré says that Russia is our friend, let me ask you a question. What has Russia done to Africa? Please, someone help me understand. Please maybe I don't know my history. Maybe I'm one of those people who has his head in the sand. So help me understand what Russia in history have done against Africa to pillage their land, to steal their minerals, to leave it waste, to execute their leaders. Someone please help me understand this. And then I want you to add China to that. That where in history has China subjugated Africa? Because when you hear all of this nonsense right now, and you even hear black people tell you that China is enslaving Africa with its debt and putting Africa in debt trap. Where did they get that from? Where are they getting that propaganda from? It's from white people. Most of you have not even seen the contract. Most of you don't know the terms of the agreements that a lot of African countries have with China. But you believe it's a debt trap. Where did you get that from? Because your colonial masters told you that. You see, they're not happy that Africa has a new player and a new friend in town. They want to be the ones to keep you economically enslaved. So the fact that Africa now is buddying up with China, right? They've propagandized the whole relationship, that China is enslaving Africa with the money, when it is not even the case. There has been stories, documentaries, even CNBC came up with a study about this that says that the loan that China is giving to Africa, the interest rate there is so minuscule, it's not a debt trap. But you believe it because you've been programmed to believe anything your colonial master, your imperialists, those who subjugate us today and enslaved our fathers, our grandfathers, and our ancestors. They told you that that's the case. Yes, I'm going to liberate your minds today. I'm going to set you free. I'm going to set you free. That you need to reassess who you are and who you're allowing to impact your lives and the lives of your children. Today, Africa is a poor continent, even though it's the richest continent in the world. The people that have robbed and continue to rob Africa are the same ones who came and bound us in chains and in shackles, who raped our women, massacred our women in the streets, took our men to go and die in their wars, enslaved us, stole us from our villages, put policies in place to keep us enslaved till today, shackled our countries, and have indebted our countries through our leaders today. These are the ones that my brothers and sisters are listening to their voices and their messaging against a people in a country that never in history ever enslaved you and I. The greatest sin ever committed against black people is slavery and colonialism. The greatest sin that black people have ever suffered at the hands of any human being has been slavery at the hands of Europeans. And today, they still look at us as their slaves. Today, they still see you and I as servants, which is why they would never sit at the same table with us and look at us as equals. And we all know this, but we still buy into their propaganda because he said so, because the white person said so. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our own mind. So, start today to liberate your mind. Start today to begin reading about your own history. Start today to begin cutting off toxic propaganda that has been sold to you. Know who your enemies are and who your friends are. Know who, have your own free will to make decisions for yourselves. Today, Africa is being warned by the West not to have anything to do with Russia, because Russia is fighting against Ukraine. And because most people in the West and Europe support Ukraine, Africa got to also support Ukraine. And you find puppet leaders in Africa towing that whole line and saying, yes, master, whatever you say, against Russia, when Russia hasn't done anything to Africa. That is a fight between the two of them. That's fine. Let them hate each other. That's their problem. Russia and the West have a history together. That's their problem. Let them deal with it. Let them hash it out. That's not your problem. That is not your fight. The idea that we hate a whole people, we don't want anything to do with them. We don't want to go and associate with them. We see them as, is because we've been sold that. Emancipate yourself. Use your God-given free will to have your own mind to your own advantage. Set yourself, your families, your children, your spouse free. You, as a head of household, it is your job to set your whole house free. And I pray that we do. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please like the video, share this content, subscribe to the channel. Nu vill jag kunna ge tillbaka allt jag inte kunnat ge förut. Det finns ju ingen annan där som kan stå här by my side, oh why. Sättet du rör på det får mig att dö för det, baby. För de här yardis, de vill ju bara dra ner oss. Men du är fett och vanlig. Och det jag lägger av min tid och jag vill ha det. Du får mig känna safety. Jag kan nog leda, baby. Och jag kommer aldrig